It was past midnight in the quiet, sterile halls of the emergency room when Daniel fell to his knees beside the hospital bed, his hands trembling as he clutched his little boy's blanket. "Please, God," he whispered, his voice breaking, "not my son. Take anything, just not him." The flickering fluorescent light above made his tears shimmer as they hit the cold tile floor. To everyone around, he was just another desperate man in the ER, but to one woman watching from across the room, his pain struck a chord she had buried deep for years. The woman, elegantly dressed but sitting alone in the corner, had eyes that looked too familiar with heartbreak. When she saw Daniel's shoulders shaking, something inside her stirred. She knew that kind of helplessness, the kind that comes when money, power, or status can't save the one person you love most. She was Eleanor Waverly, a billionaire widow whose empire could move mountains, yet whose heart still lived in the grave of the man she lost. Daniel Brooks was a single father who worked 2 jobs, one at a construction site during the day and another delivering groceries at night. Life hadn't been kind to him since his wife died 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving him alone with his 7-year-old son, Liam. He'd learned to survive on exhaustion and cheap coffee, with laughter and bedtime stories being the only light left in his home. But tonight, that light flickered dangerously. Liam had collapsed suddenly at home, his breathing uneven, his little hands cold. Daniel had rushed him to the ER, heart pounding as doctors and nurses moved swiftly around his fragile son. Every second felt like an eternity. He wasn't allowed into the treatment room, so he waited, pacing, praying, breaking a little more with every beep of a monitor echoing down the corridor. When the doctor finally came out, Daniel's heart almost stopped. "We're doing everything we can," the doctor said gently. "But his condition is critical. We need to transfer him to a specialized children's unit in the morning. The problem is, the treatment and transfer will be costly." "I'm sorry." "Costly." The word shattered him. He barely had enough to cover rent. He'd already sold his car, his wedding ring, anything worth value just to pay hospital bills from previous visits. He sank into the chair, his body shaking. "I can't lose him, he's all I have," he whispered, burying his face in his hands. Across the room, Eleanor couldn't look away. She'd come to the hospital for her own checkup, but watching the man break like that brought memories she'd tried to forget. The night her husband died in that very same ER after a heart attack. She remembered begging the doctors, crying out for a miracle, only to be left with silence and a folded blanket. For years, she'd lived behind a wall of wealth and charity events, pretending her life was fine. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, she saw someone who mirrored the same grief she once felt, raw, real, and unbearable. She stood slowly, walking toward Daniel. He didn't notice her until she softly said, "I know that pain too." Daniel looked up, his eyes red, confused. "You, what?" Eleanor's voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. "The feeling of watching someone you love slip away and knowing there's nothing you can do. The helplessness. The guilt. The silence that comes after." She swallowed hard, her tone softening. "I lost my husband here. 3 years ago. I remember every sound, every heartbeat that wasn't his." Something in Daniel's chest cracked open. For a moment, he saw not a wealthy stranger, but someone who understood the same darkness he was drowning in. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "They said he might not make it through the night if his lungs don't respond." "I can't afford." Eleanor stopped him gently. "Don't. Money should never decide who gets to live." She placed her hand on his trembling one. "Let me help." He blinked, stunned. "Help? I can't accept." "I'm not offering charity," she said firmly. "I'm offering hope. I lost mine once. I'm not letting you lose yours." The next few hours blurred into motion. Eleanor used her influence to get Liam transferred immediately to a private children's hospital with top specialists. Daniel rode beside his son in the ambulance, holding Eleanor's hand tightly, as though she were an angel sent at the edge of despair. Liam's condition remained uncertain, but with the new treatment, his chances began to rise. Days passed, filled with long nights at his bedside, sleepless prayers, and quiet conversations between Daniel and Eleanor. They talked about loss, about love, about the strange way pain connects people who might never have met otherwise. Daniel told her about the promises he made to his late wife, to keep smiling for their son, to never give up. Eleanor told him about her years of loneliness, hidden behind newspaper headlines and charity galas. As the days turned into weeks, Liam slowly began to recover. The first time he opened his eyes and whispered, "Daddy," Daniel broke down in tears, hugging him tightly. Eleanor stood at the doorway, smiling through her own tears. She hadn't felt warmth like that in years. When Liam was finally discharged, Daniel found himself struggling to say goodbye to Eleanor. She had become more than a savior, she was a friend, a light that reminded him that good people still existed. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. Eleanor smiled softly. "You already did. You reminded me that even after loss, love doesn't end. It just finds new ways to exist." He looked at her, eyes glistening. "Maybe we can both start again?" For the first time in years, she nodded, genuinely smiling. "Maybe we can." Months later, the same hospital that once held only pain now held something else. Daniel, Liam, and Eleanor returned, this time not for tragedy, but for hope. Eleanor had donated a new children's wing in Liam's name, the Liam Brooks Healing Center. As Daniel stood beside her during the ribbon-cutting ceremony, he realized something profound. Sometimes, the deepest pain brings the most unexpected blessings. That night in the ER, when he thought life was falling apart, it was quietly stitching itself back together, thread by thread, through the kindness of a stranger who knew his pain. And as Eleanor looked at Daniel and Liam laughing together, she finally whispered the words she had long forgotten how to say: "Thank you, for reminding me how to live again." The night that began with tears ended with a sunrise, not just outside the hospital window, but in their hearts. Because sometimes, even in the darkest hours, two broken souls can find healing in each other's light.